Hi, I'm Loretta Bush, President and CEO for Authority Health. March is Reading Awareness Month, and we're particularly excited because it gives us the opportunity to step away from what we typically think of the strict health topics and health issues. But at Authority Health, like many health professionals, we recognize that health goes along with literacy, and that the ability to read, to comprehend, is a social determinant of health. Now, many times, especially in these few years post-COVID, we like to think that everything is connected to COVID or can be blamed on COVID. And certainly we've seen the effects on young people and their ability to learn to read and to know how to comprehend what they're reading. But when we look at health literacy and when we look at literacy in general, we also see that there are already many adults who are not reading at their appropriate level. Now, we don't want to just focus on the problems. We want to get to solutions. And I am very pleased to have a guest here with me today. And I have to tell you, she and I met over a dinner party. And when I heard her talking about her particular program and the results that it was having with young people and their ability to learn to read and become strong readers, I knew that we would connect again and that one day she would be my guest. So I'm very pleased to have with me Pamela Good. She is the founder and CEO of Beyond Basics.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Loretta.
Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right, well, let's start right off by telling our listeners what is Beyond Basics, how does it work, and a little bit about what made you decide to start Beyond Basics.
Okay, I'll do that. Well, Beyond Basics is known for getting kids reading at grade level in about 6 weeks on average. And we've really acquired that reputation because we've been in the city and we've worked in the public school systems here in Detroit for over 20 years. And so it was through those early days, it really started with a coat donation to one of the schools, Herman Rogers Academy out at Joy Road and Southfield Freeway. But at that time, when we started just bringing in academic enrichment programs, publishing centers, book clubs, partnered with people to do Make a Difference days and things, and reading buddies, that we realized the kids could not read. And that's when we became more focused on literacy. And we tried a number of initiatives, and in the spring of 2008, we got our first grade level movement in 6 weeks. And that's when our total focus was around getting kids reading.
All right. So I remember that the thing that really caught my attention was the getting kids reading in 6 weeks. I remember you saying that. How is that possible? And tell us, is that a one-on-one tutoring? What is the secret sauce, so to speak?
Well, it's a couple things. One is you need to do an individual diagnostic assessment because you have to know how far that student is behind. Mm-hmm. A child may be a year behind and they may be 5 years behind.
Sure.
And so it's important to know that, who needs more intensive care. So we do a diagnostic assessment. We give them a prescription for literacy, and it's typically between 4 or 14 weeks would be your prescription.
Okay.
And we do pair them one-on-one, an hour a day, 5 days a week. And so we embed ourselves in the schools. They give us rooms to run our programs out of. And so once we assess that child, pair them with a tutor, they come into our Beyond Basics room there for an hour a day for the duration of their prescription. And on average, it seems like we get that grade level movement in about 6 weeks.
Wonderful. A couple of things. I love the fact that you refer to it as a prescription.
Yes.
Because being literate is a health issue. And so to have a prescription for learning how to read, I think that that's very impactful. Mm-hmm. So the duration of time, is it still that same amount of weeks? I think you're saying, did you say 6 weeks or 12 weeks? Does that change whether I'm 1 grade behind, 4 grades behind? Can I still get to it, or does it take longer the more grades I'm behind?
So oftentimes people think of learning to read as a K-3 issue, but across America, really, we have kids that are also in 4th through 12th grade that can't read.
Sure.
And so telling this story about the prescription, let's talk about the high school kids. Because you have high school kids that on the state's test would be below proficient, and they're all put in the same bucket.
Sure.
But you could have a high school student who is reading at a 7th grade level, or you can have a high school student that's reading at a 1st grade level.
Sure.
And it happens. And so that diagnostic assessment is key. And then we know that that child that's lower is going to need at least 14 weeks.
Okay.
And the one that is just less than a year behind, a 4-week program, and somewhere in between, they're going to need somewhere between 6 and 10. So that assessment leads to really the quantity of the dosage.
Got it.
Right? And I will say that for students that can't read, a structured literacy approach is key. They have to know how to decode words. Phonics is part of it. Usually a multi-sensory, so that depending on what their learning difference is, they have strategies to learn that. And then they can move on to some of the other approaches, which is whole language. But we, for these kids that can't read, use that structured literacy approach, one-on-one, an hour a day.
And now how does that relate then to reading comprehension? Because there's the ability to recognize words and to say the words and to put sentences together. But talk to us about how that relates also to reading comprehension.
Yeah, so you have to know how to sound out a word correctly before you can actually comprehend what the word is. And so what we're really teaching kids in this 4 to 14 week program is how to sound out every word correctly. Now the little ones, they're looking at 1 and 2 syllable words.
Sure.
But the high schools, it's multi-syllable words, but we're teaching them how to break those down. Now you can find, especially in vulnerable communities, and once again the high school, to just explain this model, I could have 2 11th graders, they both test in at a 4th grade level, but because of the vocabulary that one student has compared to the other, they have the mobility to move closer to grade level. And so I guess I'll just explain one other thing about this, because we often hear people talk about fundamental literacy, and what does that mean? That means that you can form letters into word sounds or acronyms that help you function in society. You're really not reading, but you know enough about letters and identifying something that you can, a bus schedule, an ATM, in the grocery store, produce, those words have meaning for you. Now, proficiency is measured at 7th grade, and what that says is that you could get to any word and sound it out correctly. So that's significant at the high school level, because after 7th grade, you're building vocabulary and comprehension. And that's really what high school and college is about. I mean, we're all illiterate in some professions, right? I mean, you go to school to learn the vocabulary of a doctor around particular disease, or a lawyer, or the trades. So that comprehension piece is about building vocabulary and comprehension, which is different than decoding.
Great. Okay.
I know, a little lesson,
well,
an academic lesson here.
But it's good information, because, both are important, and sometimes it's difficult for folks who are not in that profession to, really understand, reading and then comprehension and all of that, and all what it takes to be able to decode a word. So that was great. It was good you shared that with us.
Yes.
Now, we looked at your website, and it talks about the underlining purpose of Beyond Basics is to advocate for those who are lost in a broken system, and the belief that literacy should be equitable. Talk to us more about that, because we talk a lot about health equity, and again, that spans across the board. Being able to be literate for us is a social justice issue. So talk to us about this, helping people who are lost in a broken system, and how do you get them to reading equity?
Yes, and so I do believe that illiteracy is connected to almost every social ill in America. It disenfranchises people, even from believing in themselves, because they do not fit in, they don't know how to navigate their world, and they lose dignity, and they oftentimes think that they're stupid. And so reading and teaching people to read at any age level is really important because it does bring that dignity back.
Absolutely.
I also refer to illiteracy as America's most solvable disability. And that's because I know that in an average of 6 weeks, we can get people reading. And if you look at the inequitable pieces of some of this, you know, I don't think there's anyone to blame. Let me say that
Sure.
right now. We're all doing our best to, you know, grow as a nation. We have more people with all kinds of learning differences and stuff. But it is time to start moving away from just symptom relief into real cures. And we do it in the medical world, but we don't often do it in mental capacity. And we have to start looking at it that way. And so we're disenfranchising people because partially as a nation in education, to no fault of their own really, it's just, you know, this silent epidemic has you know, gained some traction every year. But we are providing a phenomenal educational model in America. And I still believe it's a great model, but there's a couple flaws. It's missing the mark when it comes to literacy and preparing kids to be readers before they enter the classroom. And it isn't just K-3 anymore, because this has been going on for decades.
Sure.
We have high school students showing up for a fabulous model, a good teacher in the classroom, but they do not know how to read. And they go out into society and they're not able to get a job. And they don't know why that is. And so diagnostic assessment, one-on-one tutoring, you have to give these folks what they need. And our work proves that every child is able.
Sure.
And I think that's what we need to focus on.
And not only are they not able to get a job, they're not able to understand their aftercare instructions.
Absolutely.
They're not able to read nutritional labels and to understand many of the things that keeps us healthy physically and mentally. So you're making an incredibly good point. Yeah.
So let me just talk about a couple scenarios that what you're talking about today in the health that I have come to understand because we've walked alongside people who can't read, and then we walk alongside them after they can. And on a number of occasions, I have had young men, I don't know why the women haven't, but young men text me or call me when they've been able to go to a doctor's office on their own and fill out the paperwork. They'll say, I just went to the doctor's and I didn't have to take my mom or anyone with me. I filled out the paperwork on my own. Thank you. Thank you. And
that's quite the testament to the program.
Oh my goodness. It's, I mean, when you can't read a prescription. You can't even really read how to find the doctor that someone said maybe you need. You can't. We've had young women who couldn't read the formula label on how to feed their own child.
And I think you hit it when you said it's kind of a silent problem, silent epidemic, because you know, I don't think people are very anxious to say, you know, I really can't read what you're showing me or what you're telling me at their doctor's office. So
they hide it.
They hide it.
They do.
Hide it.
They're shamed by it.
Yep.
They're shamed by it. And so I look at literacy as, you know, when we plug that foundational skill in all of these areas, right? It's not just education. Education will start providing workers and college, you know, applicants and those things once we do that. But it allows everyone else's work to blossom.
Sure.
Because now you have people who can actually participate in what you're offering. And you know, even the teachers. I mean, right now sending kids who can't read multiple grade levels behind into the classroom is a burden because they don't have an hour a day to spend. And so when that child's reading, that teacher can now do what they're able to do, which is to move them up. And I will say, teachers can get kids reading also. They're just not given those tools in the model that we have. That hour of day. Let's talk
some more about that in just a moment. So today we're talking about talking to Pamela Good. She is the founder and CEO of Beyond Basics. This is a program that really addresses the inequity in reading and reading comprehension. to really target K through 12, but do you also target preschoolers as well?
We do target preschoolers.
All right, I want to give your website
yes,
right now.
yes.
And if you want to reach out to Beyond Basics, you can reach them at beyondbasics.org. Now, you were about to say you also work with preschoolers?
Yes, we do. And so typically for us, it's over the summer that we do most of that work. But we have a family literacy center not far from here. It's at the Durfee Innovation Society, just south of Central High School. And so we reach families there.
So I actually wanted to ask you that, and I'm going to ask you a question that may seem a little bit crazy, but when you have a program that works and works in such a compact amount of time, are you in every school? Why can't you be in every school, especially with the response right now that we're all doing in relationship to COVID? There was a lot of COVID relief money where we started to recognize that, you know, nutrition is important, and it wasn't just in response to giving money to give people vaccines, which is very important, but also looking at some of the underlining health issues, social determinants of health. So are you able to be in multiple schools? And if your child is in a school that you're not in, is that where a family can access you at the Durfee Center? There was a lot of questions in there.
Yes, I know, but they can access our support at our office. We have tutors that we can bring there, and we have space.
Oh, okay.
But the Durfee Center is a good place to meet up with us at the Durfee Family Literacy Center.
Okay.
We historically have been privately funded. So as I said, the teachers didn't have these tools. There hasn't been, that they have access to do this work, right? The flow of money hasn't really funded intensive one-on-one tutoring. So they've rolled out what they've been given, and it hasn't been enough. But we weren't bound by that. We went out and raised money, went to schools, partnered with principals or school districts. Since COVID, what you have is that some of the districts, whether they're private or public, have extra dollars, and they know that intensive one-on-one's important, and they're bringing us in.
Okay.
And so we've expanded to a few locations around the state. We're in Benton Harbor, we're in the Muskegon area, Grand Rapids area, in addition to the community we've been serving here.
Sure.
But COVID was interesting because of the kids. We've all heard the term learning loss, right? Because of the learning loss and kids that were not typically in the literacy gap, falling into that gap, they're more than a grade level behind. And the news media around this, literacy has been a constant conversation, and people are starting to realize there's an epidemic.
Yeah.
There is an epidemic.
I think we're all scared now.
Don't be afraid.
Before, I think everyone's scared now because reading, many of us heard from as a child, reading is fundamental. I grew up hearing that, right? Reading is fundamental. And so right now to hear, 4, 5, 6 grades be behind, it feels like a true uphill battle.
It's a big battle, but it definitely can be triaged. And I will tell you that kids, even though at 3rd grade they may not be reading, they continue to learn in life. We learn through other ways besides reading. Now, reading's essential for school and education and learning a job, right? But they have been learning. So once you get them reading, they just propel forward from that. But given that this on average is 6 weeks, we need to just get going. And I think in terms of being in a Michigan, you have every school district that has kids in the gap. You even have the most high-achieving school district in Oakland County that has 30% in the gap. And so you have more kids because of COVID. But they were there. We have kids with ADHD, dyslexia, autism, English language learners. They have learning differences around literacy. And so this can be triaged if we come together and it gets funded and we get tutors trained and we partner with the schools. I say COVID gave us some extra vocabulary. We need to flatten the curve, 4th through 12th grade, and then some of the things need to be tweaked in the educational model so that they start providing this intensive care and diagnostic assessment.
Awesome. So I have one last question for you. So if there is a parent that's listening right now and they have a child that's struggling to read or can't read, and that child is not in one of the schools that Beyond Basics currently operates in, how would they reach you?
They can go to our website. There's an information email. We're checking that. We have people checking it, and it will get to someone who will call them back. And they could call our office.
Okay.
So either way, and then we will give them an assessment and get them a tutor.
All right, that's exciting.
Yes,
Pam Good, it has been a pleasure seeing you again.
Yes.
I am so glad that we met each other that day to hear about the exciting work that you are doing. Once again, knowledge is power, and reading is indeed fundamental. And we focused on solutions today because even if a child is not reading at their grade level, they can begin to read. So we will see you next time.
Yes, yes.